So some of you I know are fans of the show, others may have not seen it, and then the opinions are quite strong about this one. Some people just don't buy into it. And that's fine, because today we're just going to look at the technical aspects. We're making a structural analysis, and we're trying to draw some conclusions in terms of what it means for structuring, designing a TV show episode, specifically a season opener. This is not the pilot for the show. It's not a mid-season episode. It is the first episode of the final season, season 5. And I think we're going to be able to discover some interesting learnings. Breaking Bad started in 2008, initially somewhat unnoticed on AMC. It was created by Vince Gilligan, who had previously worked on The X-Files. And the show gained notoriety and a huge audience as it progressed. And by the time it went into its 5th and final season, it was at its peak of its popularity. And you could say that was almost in parallel with the character arc of the main character, Walter White, because I would say that he's probably at his peak at the beginning of this season as well. If you go to IMDb, you'll see that the show is still rated 9.4 out of 10, which is incredibly high. There's not very many shows that reach that stratospheric level of recognition. So what we're going to do today, we're going to look at where the episode sits in that season, how it introduces season 5. We'll look at the teaser or the cold open. How does the episode start and what's the meaning of that, and how is it different from what you would typically see in other shows? Then we go into Act 1, which sets up the plot for this particular episode. And there's also some recap. Even if you haven't seen Breaking Bad, there are a lot of efforts made in this episode to kind of get you on board and help you understand what is going on. Act 2 is really the fun and games. It is preparations for what ends up being somewhat like a heist, because that is the structure of this episode. You can look at it as a mini heist movie in a way. And then the 4th act, which would typically have the climax, in this case has the reward, has the payoff, has the morning after, the aftermath, so to speak. And then we have a tag where we come back to the relations, and the relationships and the characters. And you'll see that character is heavy in the beginning, in the first 10, 11 minutes of the episode, and then back at the end and in the middle we'll have a lot of fun. Breaking Bad revolves around a character called Walter White. Walter Hartwell White. This is from the Breaking Bad wiki, and it sounds like he was a historical figure. He was an American drug kingpin, former chemist and high school chemistry teacher in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the show plays and where it was also taped. He started manufacturing crystal meth after being diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. And that is the hook. That's the concept of this show. It's about a chemistry teacher who makes this unexpected, dramatic change in his life to support his family. Initially, he does this in order to pay for his treatments and secure the financial future of his family. That's his wife, Skylar, who we'll see feature prominently in this episode. His son, Walt Jr., will also be there, and infant daughter, Holly. But Walt confesses before his death in this final season that he actually did it for himself due to being good at it and feeling alive. And there's some of that comes through in this episode, but you'll see that he has transgressed. He's reached a point where things have become quite destructive, quite negative. Ultimately, that will also become self-destructive. In terms of the structure of the episode, as I said, it's a teaser, a first act, a second act, third act, fourth act, and tag, which is a traditional 1-hour TV drama structure. This is kind of similar to traditional feature film structure if you collapse Act 2 and 3. In traditional feature film structure, that would be your second act, and Act 4 in television would be what we would call Act 3 in feature film. Now, all this labeling business is purely academic. You can use whichever model you like. Ultimately, it delivers the same sort of emotional journey. And these acts are also used for act breaks, for commercials. In television, even for shows like Breaking Bad that premiere on a network channel without advertising, they're sold worldwide and end up in networks or on networks that do provide advertising. And then these acts come in handy because that's where you're going to break for the commercial. There are two plots, and that's quite surprising because you would expect for a 1 hour TV drama to be more complex. Earlier in our classes, we looked at the pilot for The Wire, and although it was only the pilot, we could see that it had a tremendous complexity. There were, if I remember well, 4 or even 5 subplots that were started right there in that pilot episode. Breaking Bad could have done that because it had its audience already. We knew the characters, so you could initiate new plot threads or continue existing plot threads with more than 2 to follow. But this is really, really simple. There's only 2 stories, and actually there's really one that drives the entire episode, and that is about the destruction of the laptop. The laptop is a piece of evidence that needs to go. And there's only 2 scenes really that intercut that, and that form the B plot around the character of Ted Beneke, which is a pickup from the previous season. In fact, everything, the entire episode is kind of like a wrap-up, a clean-up from the previous season, the season 4 final episode of that. Now, let's go into it, and we're going to watch the first scene. What do you need to know in order to appreciate this? The scene cycles back to the very opening of the show. Here you go. 4 years before, 2008. The first scene in that episode, in the pilot episode, was Walter White celebrating his 50th birthday at the breakfast table with his family. And the first scene of this episode is a reference back to that. And it also gives us an idea of where in the timeline we are with the story. So you'll see that the story started exactly 2 years before the scene.
Whoa, what happened there?
It's my birthday.
Yeah? Well, happy birthday. Oh, you headed to California?
No. Here.
Okay. So what's here?
Business.
Even if you're not familiar with Breaking Bad, you may have seen the artwork. Walter White, Bryan Cranston's always shown bald because first as a result of the illness and later as a result of his re-imaging, his restyling as Heisenberg, that's his cool look. And here he looks like a bum, but he's got his hair. It's somewhat confusing, but not unusual for Breaking Bad because right from the second season, there was this habit of opening with a teaser that kind of misdirected us, where we saw images we weren't sure what they meant, and it was only paid off at the end of that season. What you've just witnessed was a setup for the finale of the show, which is 16 episodes later, or 15 episodes later, at the end of the next year. Season 5 was broken into 2 seasons of 8 episodes each, or half seasons. A teaser, also called a cold open, is that part of the show that precedes the titles. And it doesn't always relate to the plot that follows within the episode. And that's exactly what's the case here. You're being teased. You know, we're being given something that makes us anticipate. Remember our class about the push and pull, where we were talking about dramatic tension that pushes the story forward. And then there's mystery that pulls us towards the answer at the end of the episode or the season, and in this case, the whole series. Also interesting about this is the way it half teases us, but also pays off for people who've paid attention. Because when Lucy, the waitress, asks, "What brings you here?" and he says, "Business," at that moment, the dude comes in, and later we recognize him. He was the arms dealer that we saw earlier in the series. So we know that this is going to be about an arms transaction. And then that's confirmed when the boot of the car opens and we see the automatic weapon there. Act 1 will do more wrap up about what preceded in the previous episode. And here's what you need to know. Walter White started out as a chemistry teacher, but all the way up until season 4, he's been climbing up the ladder as a drug dealer. The only character who was in his way was Gus Fring, played by Giancarlo Esposito. And there's a phenomenal finale of this season 4, which was a classic moment in television history when we see the demise of that character, which means that now Walter White is the man. He is the highest in town when it comes to the drug business. He's become the emperor. And so that's where we pick up.
Gus Fring is dead. He was blown up along with some person from some Mexican cartel, and the DEA has no idea what to make of it. Do you know about this? Was this you? What happened?
I won.
So this is all about removing the evidence, everything he needed to prepare for the acts at the end of season 4. That was a pot of lilies of the valley, referring to a massive plot line over the previous seasons. The irony is that his daughter was born in the episode where he killed the daughter of another father. End of season 2.
Well, don't you think I rate a low, at least?
Hello.
So are you gonna talk to me here? Are you gonna show some kind of, I don't know, some kind of mild relief that I'm alive?
I am relieved, Walt. And scared.
Scared? Scared of what?
You.
So he did it all for his family, and now he's at the top, but he's losing what he ultimately did it all for. But it doesn't matter. He's now doing it for himself. And then we have the episode's inciting incident.
Oh, shit.
So we're now 11 minutes into that episode. It's pretty much all character. And if you look at what we've seen so far structurally, we had that teaser that was more in the context of the crime. We saw the gun transaction. That kind of promised us that it's still the show that we're used to, but just hang in there. We're now going into a long character wrap-up to basically set it very clear where Walter White is in the relationship with his family, and it's not a good place. So now we start the actual plot, the outer journey of this episode. Walter White realizes something. He's got a problem. And I wanted to point something out, a technique that is used very often in craftfully plotted episodes where you're giving away a clue to the audience, but you need to have watched the show and remembered and paid attention to realize what it is. Some of the audience would not have necessarily immediately understood why he reacted like that. The real fans would have, because the real fans would have been thinking about the entire past 4 seasons and figured out where are the plot holes, what are the dangers, what may be exploited in future episodes and future storylines. So we're being given a little bit more time to figure that out. And now slowly the hints are being drip-fed. And in this scene we see Hank, who's the brother-in-law, he's a DEA agent. He is examining the remains of what was the meth lab that blew up as part of Walt's actions at the end of season 4. So here we're going to slowly go to the one element that this whole episode is going to be about. That was a camera. And now the rest of the audience will have an opportunity to catch up. They will remember that the feed of this camera came to the laptop. So that's all we need. That's all we need as an inciting incident. So now we're in the story. Now we go to one of the muscle men. This is a scene with Mike, who is still recovering from something that happened to him somewhere in Mexico.
Come on, hey. Hey! It'd be nice. Just be nice. Let Wendell in there. Wendell doesn't eat nobody.
So now think about the structure of this episode. We've had so much character. We're in the 15th minute of the episode. It's time we get some action. And what is not unusual, right after a call to adventure or an inciting incident, in a feature film, this would be the end of the first sequence. You need some action. You need some forward movement, and this is what I would call the threshold. This is where the characters move forward to the next stage. Physically and visibly on the screen, there's also a scene with travel and excitement.
Son of a bitch! Son of a bitch! Whoa, whoa, whoa! Hold up, hold up! Get out of my way, kid!
Mike, wait a minute, all right? Let him talk.
Let him talk.
I am done listening to this asshole talk.
Now get out of my way!
He's got something you need to hear, all right? What'd you do, Jesse?
Do you even know? Do you even know what you've done?
Yeah, he saved his own life.
One more word!
Mike, if you kill him, you're gonna have to kill me. Come on.
As you saw, quite cinematic. Here, the three men come together. They were the buddies, the allies in the previous season. This Walt with his sidekick Jesse, and Mike, who was the muscle for the drug kingpin who died at the end of season 4. And at the end of this particular scene, the objective is stated. They realize there's a problem. There's that camera. There's a laptop, and they need to do something about it. So in dramatic terms, this ends our first act. I'm not thinking about production acts, about where the production company decides to put the black for the commercials. This is really in purely dramatic terms. The objective is stated. They need to deal with the problem. They need to remove or eliminate or destroy the laptop. End of Act 1. And typically at the beginning of Act 2, you would have the antagonist reinforcing the problem for the heroes. So in my thinking, this is the first scene of Act 2. And that's the antagonist, Hank, the DEA agent. But look, this is where the production decided to put the act break. Black goes after that first scene of what I would call Act 2. Let's have a look and just do a quick recap in an overview what those acts look like so far. So there's 2 plots, and this was the teaser that we saw at the diner, ending with the automatic weapon in the boot. Then we go to Act 1. And that's all the character interactions with wife Skylar, son Walter Jr. Then we go to the lab where Hank finds the camera. And then we see Mike with the chickens in Mexico. Then they race through the desert. And that's where, in my thinking, the act ends. Mike, Jesse, and Walter White, they go for the laptop. 12 minutes and 20 seconds duration of the act. So we're now almost 15 minutes into the episode. The total duration of the episode is 42 minutes. So we're just past the 1/3 mark. Now you see that the packing of the laptop, in my thinking, is beginning of Act 2. The slashes there indicate the black, so that's where the production goes to black, where commercials would happen if the whatever station broadcast this would need them. Now we're going into what is the fun and games of the story. Act 2 is all about dealing with that problem and setting up the heist, doing whatever's necessary to remove that laptop. And you see that is running for 4 scenes with Walter White and Mike and Jesse. Before we get to a short scene with just Mike and Jesse where Walt is not present. So the color coding, what it means is each scene in red is a scene with Walter White. So green is Walt's allies, I would say. Skylar, in this case, he's still considering her an ally. And this is where the new storyline kicks in for the first time. This is the incident with Beneke. And that comes back at the end of this act. So these are the only 2 scenes that are not feeding into that overall plot of the heist of the laptop. So everything relates to the main plot. And as you can see, most scenes are also with Walter White present. So this says something about the point of view, about the type of show this is. Now, there will be more plot lines in Breaking Bad, and there were in previous seasons, but for this opening episode for season 5, things are being kept really, really simple. What I want you to realize right now is that we had all this character material early in the episode. For 11 minutes, we were really recapping in terms of how the characters related to one another. And now we're going to have this action-driven heist sequence where there's not a lot of character going on, to be honest. But then at the end, we'll converge back to the characters and we'll see how they have changed. And this is where, even in that one episode, we see this movement forward of the characters. Because don't forget, what we got to see in that teaser was a man who seemed somewhat disheveled. There was a gun being bought, but then he tipped the waitress $100. So that is the save the cat moment. It shows a positive side of Walter White, which we're not going to see much of in this episode. We're going to see him shift towards the darkest we've ever seen. So at the same time, he's the highest in his own achievements. He considers himself at the peak of his life. He's at a point where he feels he lives, but on a level of sheer humanity, he's fallen the deepest that we will ever see him. I like this scene. This is, I think, the longest scene in the episode. It's a dialogue scene in which the men are contemplating how to deal with this laptop. First of all, they're trying to figure out where it is, and they learn that it is at the evidence storage facility at the police station somewhere in Albuquerque. And then they're trying to figure out how do they deal with that, because it is heavily guarded. You don't break into that sort of place easily. And so Mike is taking control because he's been dealing with that sort of stuff for a long time for Gus Fring. And then he goes into this argument with Walt. And this scene, the end of this scene, still gives a little bit of that light-hearted tone in terms of how it's executed. You see Jesse in the background looking at these 2 men, and he has an idea, but they're completely ignoring him. So let's have a look how that plays out.
Because Helon doesn't destroy evidence.
A magnet,
Fine,
though,
so
maybe
a bomb
like...
then. Maybe we plant a bomb outside.
Oh, actually, I knew a crew out of Fort Worth that tried to blow up an evidence room from outside. About all they did was take out a couple of hedges. You are probably talking about 2 feet of reinforced concrete.
Or what about a magnet?
What magnet? What about it?
They're going to try the magnet. We're now halfway. So up to this point, they're trying to figure out a way of dealing with the issue. Now they've got a plan, and they're immediately going to put that plan into motion. There's the magnet.
Expensive. Leaving aside engineering, bringing some kind of alternate power source, my primary sticking point is I actually need the thing.
So it's a very straightforward story. It's really about a very visible goal. They need to destroy the laptop, and here we see a super magnet that's going to do the job. But I mentioned at some point there's this one scene where Walt is not present. Walt is going to the office, and this is just Mike and Jesse by themselves. So Mike was giving advice to Jesse saying, get out.
If you have any brains, you'll take that money you saved and you skip town.
And Jesse
Today,
convinces
right
Mike
now.
to stay on board.
I don't think this can work.
But here is where, at 23 minutes, just past the halfway point of this episode, we skip to the B plot. And you see that much of this is still recap.
Come in.
He's the lawyer.
Get in. Close the door.
Can I sit down? I'm going to sit down.
Okay, why are the police gonna call
There was
police?
an incident with Beneke, with the...
Oh, God. Ted's dead.
No. He just woke up.
What is suggested here is that if he woke up, he may speak, and that may be a problem for both Skylar and Walter White. So now that's planted, there's tension around it, we can skip away. We can cut to the A story again and keep that B story because it has its own tension, and we'll come back to it later. So this is more fun and games. It's the testing of the magnets.
Fingers crossed, don't yank the drive shaft through the floor.
Whoa. Wait. Yeah, that did it. Magnets! Oh!
So that's what it's going to look like. So we're now pre-visualizing what the finale of this episode may look like. So all this preparation, and now we can see forming in our minds what that climactic final act will look like. But we want to know what happened to Ted Beneke. So that's the second and final scene in that B plot.
Ted Beneke, I'm a friend of his. But if it's not a good time, I can...
No, this is fine. I'm just finishing up. Come on in.
And you see how it is delayed the moment that you'll see him. This is all about suspense, waiting for the final moment. So first her reaction, and only then will we see
Hey, Ted.
Ted himself. And we learn in this scene that Ted will not speak.
Skylar, I haven't said anything to anyone. I told them it was an accident. They tripped and fell. That is all they know.
He is so petrified about what happened to him that he's safe. He's not going to give away the secret, and nobody needs to worry about that. So that closes that plot line for now. It's the second, as I said, and final scene in the B plot. So this is, as you can see here, we're now about 28 minutes in when that scene starts. And then we'll go to a very short Act 3, that is the climax where they go into the police station. But you could argue that in traditional 4-act structure for television, Act 3 leads us to the low point. Now, this opening episode for season 5 has a somewhat different feel to it. It is almost all fun and games. So even that Act 3, where it would typically be quite a bit darker, is still lighthearted. It's about fun. It's about, this action of going to the police station. Everything works quite well. They, as you can see, Mike sabotages the security so that they get in easily. They enter the grounds. They park the truck. Then they activate the magnets. So let's have a look at how that plays out. You can say this is the cave. This is the cave where the reward sits that they need to get. Typical for the heist structure. The truck tips over. And that is that one moment where we feel the whole operation may have failed. That is what arguably could be the lowest point. And then after that lowest point, we need the resurrection. We need the climactic finale, which here sits still in Act 3 in accordance to how the episode is cut. And as you can see, up to this point, it's really about a bunch of guys having a lot of fun, action sequence. And looking at that overview that I just showed you there, I think I should have put the next scene in the next act. I'll play it out for you. You see what I mean.
Did all that even work just now?
Yes, it worked.
I was supposed to take that on faith. Yeah? Why? How do we know?
Because I say so.
And that's a new Walter White. And that brings us back to character. So we see the change, we see how he now descends further into darkness. But this scene is a threshold. They're driving, it is right after the lowest point, right after the cave. So in traditional story structure, that would be your beginning of Act 3. In a 4-act structure, it would be the beginning of Act 4. However, look at the next scene. It's an establishing shot. Usually that opens a new act. You see black and then establishing shot. And the final act gives us the answer whether or not they were successful.
Undamaged. Bag still sealed. One 158-73321. Fring Gustavo. Samsung laptop computer. Damaged. Glass screen is broken and in pieces. Bag still sealed.
So that answers it, but the scene is not over yet.
One 158-73317. Fring Gustavo. Frame photograph of 2 men. Damaged. The glass is broken and photo has slipped out of its frame. Bag appears to be slightly punctured by broken glass. Huh. Check it out.
And this is the only tiniest hook into the next episode. Typically that would be part of what we call the tag, but here it sits in that 4th act, which is the resolution and the closing of the plot of the entire episode. So immediately tagged on in this particular scene, we have a hint to where the next story, next episode may go. All right, and that's really wrapping up the fun part, the plot part, the action part of this episode. And now we go back into character. There's a remarkable scene here between Saul, the lawyer, and Walt that also redefines their relationship. Initially, it was Saul who was introducing Walt to the criminal world, who was teaching him the ropes, telling him how to behave. And here it is quite the opposite. So we see the turning of the tables when Walter White responds to this and approaches Saul.
What are you... Come on. Hey. Hey.
We're done when I say we're done.
We've never seen Saul like this. Intimidated, confused. This is not the character we know. And then a similar scene that recalibrates the relationship between Walt and his wife Skylar, and it ends on a very creepy final line, and that ends the character part of this episode. This is the tag. This is the literal tag, the final shot of this episode.
I heard what happened to Ted.
He's not going to talk.
I forgive you.
And that's the end of the episode. Creepy, scary, and an indication of where the character will go in this final season. Let's go to our overview and the conclusion. So we saw Walt quite smug in the car with his 2 associates. And in Act 4, we have the closing of this plot line where we now know the laptop is broken, so the action was successful. And then we have the scene with Walt and Saul, where that relationship is clearly changed. And we end the final scene in the tag with Skylar at home, and he says, I forgive you. Conclusion. There's a very traditional story structure that's all revolving around a very simple, clear plot. We have some character bookends, and the fun, the action part sits in the middle. You're seeing the wrong side of my screen. Let's see if I can swap that. Yeah. Tonally, it's a very light episode. I'll move this out of the way. And it wraps up that previous 4th season. It is rewarding for viewers who have watched the show with intent and with passion and have remembered and questioned everything they saw before, because there's a lot of detail that comes back. But it's also rewarding for people who jump in new or were only half committed, because this particular episode is standalone. It is a story in its own right that has its own resolution. And then we have this tiny end hook that leads us into the next episode with the address and the bank that relates to the operations of Gus Fring, who just died. So for those who are familiar with Breaking Bad, did you get anything out of it that you didn't already know or hadn't already noticed? Did it give you any new insights? And for those who are unfamiliar, did this give you some light on how TV drama structure may work?
I saw like the first couple of episodes of Breaking Bad, and then I wasn't able to watch the rest of the show. So my question is, when the writers sit down to write this sort of thing, when did the writers know what the ending was going to be? Did they know that, and I'm talking about all 5 seasons, because all these pieces go together. And I was just curious to know how much of you might know about that.
Yeah.
When did they know the ending? When did they have the whole arc?
When they finished season 4, they had no idea how they were going to end season 5. And I said, maybe incorrectly, I said the reason why they broke it in 2 was because they couldn't make more money. I'm sure that played a role. But it was also, they didn't have an idea how to end it yet. They wanted to have the time. They wanted to give themselves the time to come up with the best possible ending, rather than having to work under the pressure of delivering the best finale possible in a matter of months. So yes, they didn't know it. What Vince Gilligan did know very early on, and I think that was part of the concept, he wanted Walter White to be like Mr. Chips who turned into Scarface. So that was the broad character arc he had a very good idea about. But specifically on a plot level, what that would look like, he hadn't figured that out. But as for those who have seen Scarface, they know how that ends. So it had to be somehow similar to that, I guess.
Again, going into these things, I'm just curious to know how the writers worked. Would they have, I don't know, a big whiteboard with like all these different endings and the what if endings, and then they start shuffling the deck and figuring out how would that have worked, do you think?
Well, we know. I'll show you. If you Google Breaking Bad bead board, and I'm doing it right now, and I'm going to show you the result. I'll show you that actually shows you exactly how they worked. This is what you get. So what you see here is one episode, the teaser and all the beats in that teaser. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 beats in the teaser, and there are 7 plus 8, 15 beats in Act 1, and then another 22 in Act 2, and so forth. So you see, this is what is created in the writer's room with 7 or 8 people who are brainstorming story ideas, and they write it down on this board as they populate the episode. Now, a similar exercise is done prior to doing the detailed work on the episode. They will brainstorm the season. So they will have, instead of having teaser, Act 1, Act 2, and so forth, they will have episode 1, episode 2, and episode 3, and so forth. And they'll have, for each episode, they might have teaser, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and 4 in less detail. But yeah, you think on different levels at the same time. So they think about the overview of the season, the broad picture of each episode, with the act outs for each episode, and then at a later stage they go and brainstorm the individual episodes. And once the beat board is populated, that's handed to the writer who's going to deliver that particular episode, and you'll see that different writers do. It's divvied up among the people in the writer's room, and you'll see that usually the showrunner, the creator, in this case Vince Gilligan, they'll do the opening episode, and very often they also do the finale. All right, there we go. That was the overview of the first episode of Breaking Bad, 501, Live Free or Die. the opening episode for the final season that aired in 2012 and then ran all the way to 2013. That was today's class. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a like. Even better, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to be notified next time we post free content here, make sure you push the bell button. There's a lot more here on this channel. Browse around. We have short snippets. We have full-length 1-hour masterclasses. And there's certainly something in there to your taste. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you next time.